We've learned quite a lot already, and we'll start with the number that we're often focusing on when it comes to these figures is gross domestic product. So how well is the overall economy doing right now? These are the forecasts from last time around, 1.12%, and then relatively kind of around that kind of 1.5% level after that. How did that change when the OBR updated these numbers? Well, slightly weaker than that last year. This is the big one to focus on, though. Look, the economy is considerably weaker this year than previously expected. But, and this is something the Chancellor was really wanting to underline, it's a bit stronger in the future. And that's partly, not all of it, but a little bit of that is down to the fact that she has these pro-growth measures, and those growth measures include extra house building. So part of that is down to that. But in the short run, what this does is it makes it really problematic for her fiscal rules. The fiscal rule that she needs to focus on, above all, there's two of them, but the main one, the most biting one, is this. She needs to eliminate the deficit. Right now, the government faces this big deficit, and by the end of the forecast horizon, over here, she needs to get that down into this area, so down into a surplus. And when you hear people talk about headroom, that's the headroom there. And last time around, it was £9.9 billion. We got the latest numbers through this time around, and have a look at this. Ooh, it's £9.9 billion. In fact, actually, I've gone into the spreadsheets. It's not just £9.9 billion. Last time, it was £9.93 billion. This time, £9.93 billion. So it's almost like nothing at all has actually changed. There's nothing to see here. But now let's just dig into these numbers, because actually there is quite a lot going on beneath the surface. The swan is moving along. And last time, as I say, £9.9 billion. I've turned that kind of positive, because that's headroom. We'll talk about headroom these days. But last time, £9.93 billion, as I say, that was actually, you don't see this on the surface, that was entirely wiped out. £14 billion disappeared, basically, because of what I showed you a moment ago. So weaker growth, but also higher debt interest costs. That's gone. It's gone. So she needs to try and recoup that. And how does she do it? Well, all sorts of different measures. So first of all, you've got various different, every chancellor likes to do this, efficiency, evasion, that brings it up a few £1 billion. You've got other measures like switching from aid to defence. This is actually kind of an accounting quirk, really. But nonetheless, moving a lot of money from aid to defence moves this up because this is current spending and it helps on that front. But here's the big one, spending. Spending cuts bring in about £6 billion, £5 billion, £6 billion. And you can see you're rebuilding it. And the government said originally that it was going to raise about £5 billion from welfare. That would have taken it well above £10 billion. But then the OBR stepped in and said, no, I don't think you're going to raise that much. And it comes down. But happily for the Chancellor, £9.93 billion. We're back where we started. But along the way, what kind of implications do all of those policies actually have? Well, consider this one. This is looking at the potential poverty impact of those benefits changes. You have an increase in relative poverty and absolute poverty for children against the baseline of 50,000. So 50,000 children now facing poverty who weren't necessarily before versus the baseline, so versus what was forecast last time around. And overall, for working age adults, you're talking about 250,000. As a result of these changes. That's the government's own numbers there. Also, spending. So that was welfare. Spending brought in quite a lot of extra money. But again, there are implications here. So last time around, this is actually not last time around, Jeremy Hunt was talking about relatively low levels of spending increase in the next few years. The Chancellor last time really wanted to distinguish herself from Jeremy Hunt and said that, no, look, we're not going to have 1% in the future. We're going to have 1.3, 1.4, and we're going to have this big amount of spending in the year we're in right now. This time, these bars have got a bit higher. OK, so you've got more spending this year, or the year we're about to go into, more spending next year. But look at these ones. Look, as of 2027 to 28 and the next 3 years, you've got the same level of spending increases that Jeremy Hunt planned. Really striking, and I imagine that's going to be a topic of discussion for quite some time, particularly amongst many in the Labour Party, particularly given that when you break it down by different parts of the government, look at this. Core schools might well see cuts. Other departments might see cuts. And we're going to have more detail on that from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. But nonetheless, whether this is austerity or not, there are certain parts of government that will be facing cuts in future as a result of having less spending. Final thing, I know there's been a lot so far, but final thing is just to say, All of this was to try to get that headroom back to exactly the same number it was before. In other words, there. But if you take a step back and look at this chart, these levels of headroom, the safety net that you have here against your fiscal rules, are really tight. It's some of the tightest amount of headroom, some of the least safe kind of valves against future economic problems that any chancellor has left themselves. So that's really the big picture so far. Everything is evolving right now. We're having more detail coming through every moment, so I can't say there won't be changes in future. But Sophie, that's the big picture.